Well, hello, everybody. For the third time today, I say hello. Happy Wednesday. It's definitely a wonderful, wacky Wednesday. And we have with us again our beautiful Professor Brice, who is always welcome. And it's always fun to have you. How are you, Brice?
I'm
Brice Lee.
tired. Y'all, Mercury retrograde has kicked my ass. It just started. And so if you're feeling it, guys, I was telling you, Shanti, I went to go teach this morning. Like I had problems with the stereo. Like I was like, crap, it's Mercury retrograde. So if you see bags under my eyes, there's no conspiracy, guys. I'm just tired. But I got some juicy gossip today, you guys. This story that we're going to talk about today is what I live for. This is why I started my channel. I'm so excited.
Well, I must say, we really have been, between the Monday shows and the Wednesday shows, we're kind of going through quite a bit of stuff. Edgar, I'm going to put you in timeout.
Just because we have a sense of humor, Edgar, does not mean we're silly. That's one thing the darkness doesn't know how to do is laugh. So if you have a trouble with laughing at things and laughing at situations and finding the humor, you might want to like reevaluate, do some self-assessment on where you are aligned.
Oh, wow. Anyway, so it's good to have you guys back again. And nice to see and especially, right now there's so much going on around the origins and, this whole Luciferian cabal system is sort of coming up to the fore. But, I mean, I got to tell you, I don't think we've even started scratching the surface yet. I honestly think there's so much that goes on. There's so much underneath the surfaces of this earth. And on this third dimension that we're living in, I mean, we really just a slither of a layer of what goes on. But yeah, it's awesome to see how they've really messed with us, but maybe they haven't. Everything is a divine plan. So we just, this is our opportunity to just flip and hell, just center a line and just activate who we are, anyway.
No, I will say that speaking of, one thing I want to put a little bit of a warning out, guys, like so I'm going to say this family's name maybe 1 or 2 times, because I will say that there are a lot of bigger podcasts and platforms out there that have tried to venture into this legend regarding this family, and they've gotten the proverbial knock on the door, gotten the proverbial phone call. So, and of course, that's what I've heard. That's what I've been told. But with that being said, I'm just going to be very careful. I'm just going to call this a legend for entertainment purposes only. Wink, wink. About the my favorite new way of saying it, the Illuminati. I think we need to have a T-shirt that says that, because if you guys kind of off topic, I actually said to my boyfriend today, I was like, that schmurder that happened, like we were just talking, and I actually called it a schmurder instead of the real word, because I'm so used to like using the YouTube dialect. He was like, a what? I was like, oh wait, I'm not filming right now, it's fine. So you guys now, have you heard of this family? And I'll say now, it's the Payseur family. Have you heard of this family, Shanti?
Only from you, I must say. I've heard some rumblings, when you do your research and stuff, but they didn't register to me as someone who was a person of interest at that stage. But apparently, that's how they do it.
We're going to
inside, don't they?
And I don't know. And guys, and in all seriousness too, and I want to say this, like, as we get into this legend, I say this on my channel all the time, I don't know what the truth is. And we do know that the establishment, the Illuminati, that they put out junk conspiracy a lot, because you know that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like once you wake up and you see things, you can't go back to sleep, right? You see it. And so they know that once you figure them out, you figure them out. And so they will try to throw in junk conspiracy to distract you, even in the truth of the world. That's why there's so many infiltrators. It's funny with your show yesterday with Jessica. I was like, there's some vampires in the truth world, some content creators that I do not work with anymore because I know the truth about them. So they're everywhere. Infiltrators are everywhere. And so I don't know. I find this legend to be very entertaining and very fascinating to ponder. With that being said, if this legend, let me start, if this family, this P, as I call the P family, because it's kind of, the algorithms will trigger if we say their name too much, which is a red flag in itself, right? But let's say if the P family is as bad as they say they are, then the legend itself doesn't even actually matter, right? Because they're bad. Now, if it doesn't matter where their origins are in that regard. So this whole story of how they came to be could just be junk conspiracy to keep us distracted from what they're really doing. I don't know, but I feel like as long as we know that, and again, guys, I'm tired. So if I'm not making sense, please let me know. As long as we're aware enough to know that, I think we can entertain these ideas of like where this legend actually came from. So the P family is allegedly for entertainment purposes only. Wink, wink. Don't call us Illumishmati. It's just for entertainment purposes only. Don't knock on our door. Are one of the secret families. So we have all these families that are out there on the camera, in the magazines, the puppets, the Windsors, the celebrities. But then we have this whole layer of families, like the next level up in the pyramid, that are kind of, I don't think they're at the top of the pyramid, but they're one of the families that are kind of behind the scenes. So they're, in my opinion, if this conspiracy is true, they're probably more powerful than like the P family. I mean, then like the P family is probably more powerful than like the Windsors. They're probably more along the lines of Somerset Belanoff, I would think, because they stay very behind the scenes. Now, the P family themselves, as far as American businesses, they are a very wealthy family. They own a lot of railroads. They own a lot of corporations. That in itself could be a red flag, but also we have to remember too, reasonable doubt, keeping, a grain of salt. Being wealthy doesn't necessarily mean you're bad, right? There are plenty of wealthy people, not many, but plenty that might not have a whole lot to do with this group. But being said, it is kind of a red flag as how much power they have in corporate America. And because their power is consolidated in corporate America, I think that's what keeps them kind of in the shadows, right? Because we know that a lot of these corporations have like different names, but they're owned by the same family, but the family name isn't associated with the actual company. And so we don't think about it, right? We don't think about like who actually is owning, it's easy to stay hidden if you are pulling the strings in corporations without actually being on the magazine covers. All right. So where does the P family? Now, this is an American family. It's a French name, which we're going to get to, but this is an American family. So the legend goes, this is where it gets super juicy because I love these stories. So back during the French Revolution, which I've said it before, you guys, and I will say it again, nobody revolutions like the French do. Like the French.
Yeah, have you been to Africa?
Yeah, twice. But I'm talking like the guillotine. Like the French people went kind of wackadoo when it came to like overthrowing the monarchy. Like they were just chopping heads off.
Yeah, I mean, and they do it with such style. I mean, it's like recently all the farmers going to Parliament and spraying shit all over Parliament.
I'm telling you, like, I'm applauding. I'm slow clapping. If I were a French politician, I would be crapping in my pants right now because history repeats itself. I mean, if they're going to spray shit on the building, like, that's the least. Like, y'all, they might pull the guillotine. They put the guillotine away in the 1970s, y'all. Like, they can very easily dust that thing out and pull it back out again, right? Like, that is the French Revolution. Now, remember, I want to also clarify this as well. Shanti, we've talked about Tartaria. We've talked about alternative history that we're not sure of. And if the Tartarian timeline is true, this might make everything I'm about to tell you bunk. So everything that I'm about to tell you as far as this story is coming from the official historical narrative that we've been taught in school, right? So I'm totally aware. So before we get those comments, we're totally aware of Tartaria, but in my mind, the way I'm doing it is I'm just keeping both timelines in my head until we have more evidence of which one is true. I'm trying to keep an open mind about everything. Yeah. So the French Revolution, for those who are not French or American, you might not be aware that the American Revolution, okay, let me back up a little bit more. The French and the English hate each other, right? We know that, right? The French, even though I've got both French, heavily French and English descendants, my ancestors, but they're like the same brand of white person, but they like hate each other. They're separated by basically a creek. Like the English Channel is like a creek. You can stand on one part of English.
The Austrians. I mean, it's just like ridiculous, you know.
They
Wow.
each other, and so like there is so when the American Revolution. Now remember, guys, before the American Revolution happened, before we get, because this is kind of what inspired the French Revolution, according to the mainstream narrative. There was a war that happened before the American Revolution between the French and the English over the colonies. If you've ever seen the movie The Last of the Mohicans, that is about this war, and the English won. So that's why I'm speaking English to you right now. If the French had won, I would be speaking French right now, right? So the English won over the colonies, and then a little while later, the colonists like dumped the tea in the ocean and basically gave England the middle finger. And do you know who came to America to help the colonists beat the British? The French. The Marquis de Lafayette, like we like honored French military men who came over. They were happy to come over. They were like, yeah, we'll go over to America. We'll send them horses and artillery. We'll be glad to help them defeat the English. So which I think is so comical. Like that to me is like the pettiness of history. Like I tell you guys all the time. Like if you're gonna sit in a history class, they're gonna give you the official reasons, but y'all, they're just petty. Like everybody in history is just petty. We're just petty. And so the French and the Americans, when the American won the revolution, the French and the Americans got very, very close. Like Benjamin Franklin was going over to France and delegating. There was all this huge camaraderie between the American colonists and the French. All right. So then right after the American Revolution, the French people were like, you know what? We're going to do the same thing. And that's when they arrested Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, and they brought them and put them in a prison. And they started chopping heads off, right? So, you know, I don't want to get too much into like Marie Antoinette. We all know Marie Antoinette. We all know who this historical woman was, and her husband Louis XVI, who was a Bourbon. Now, this is where things get super interesting too. The Bourbons came in with Henry IV, which we've talked about. Henri IV on this channel with his missing head. He was one of the ones that had a missing head. Now Henri IV came in as the King of France after Catherine de Medici. We've talked about her too a long time ago. She's the queen that put cow poo in her hoo-ha to attract her husband so he'd boink her. That chick. All right. So all of her sons were killed. So that ended the House of Valois. That was the House of Valois. So after the House of Valois, they had to go get the cousin down in the Pyrenees, the Bourbon dude, Henry IV, to come to France, and thus started the Bourbon line of France, okay? Now, if y'all remember, the Bourbons down in the Pyrenees, before all this happened, which Jesus painting guy married into the Bourbon family? Cesare Borgia. That asshole. He married into the Borgia family long before this happened. So we can say now that this P family, as we get into the story, are descendants of the Hapsburgs. Y'all know the Hapsburgs. Hapsburgs is they're probably the poster children for don't inbreed, because they had the chin, they had some out of all the royal families, they had the Hapsburg hump. Like they're literally God being like, you're not supposed to boink your cousins. Like, this is why you're not supposed to boink your cousins. So the P family, because Marie Antoinette married into the Bourbon line. She was a Hapsburg from Austria, right? Louis XVI was a Bourbon who had descended from the Bourbons of the Pyrenees through Henry IV, okay? So we've got this French Revolution, which again, this was, I mean, the French Revolution, as far as the circumstances that the French people were living in, the commoners, way worse than what the colonists just got pissed off over a 3% tax. The French people, there was a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. It was very, very, very obvious what was going on between this divide. So I don't blame the French people from being so angry. I get it. I get it. And they definitely went vigilante. Now, when the Bourbon family, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and their 2 children were arrested, they had previously tried to escape to Austria. Okay. Now get this, guys, get this insanity, this arrogance. They would have been able to escape if they had actually just dressed like normal people. But they refused to put on like normal clothes and like take the wigs off.
No.
I'm serious.
Okay, well, then I'm sorry. That is absolutely self-inflicted captivation.
I mean, that is like, it is like, again, with the American Revolution, we're taught in schools as Americans that one of the reasons,
crazy.
so crazy. One of the reasons why the English lost is because they wore red coats. Like we could see them.
Yes, exactly. And the same in Africa, yeah. South Africa, when they were fighting against the Boers, everyone, I mean, it was everyone knew the Brits got shot because they wore bright red coats to fight. Yeah.
And with the Bourbons, it was the same thing. They were in their freaking carriages, their royal carriages gilded with gold, trying to cross the border. Are you kidding me? Dumbasses. Like, if you had just put on some freaking peasantry, if you had gone to your local 18th century Walmart and gotten some like peasantry clothes to wear for a few hours, you probably would have saved your own lives. But nonetheless,
or just sew them from bags.
Just borrow your servant's clothes. Like, nonetheless, pride cometh before the fall. And that is a very good example of pride cometh before the fall. So they got arrested right before they were about to cross the border into Austria. And so they got sent to prison. Both the parents, obviously Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, and their 2 surviving children. So they had a few children, a few of them passed away. So they had 2 children. Maria Theresa was the daughter. She was the oldest, and Louis Charles. Louis Charles is the subject of this legend. He's the nucleus. Okay. So this whole story, this whole legend starts off in the prisons in Paris where they're holding the Bourbon family. Now, we have to talk a little bit about French law at this time, as far as monarchy is concerned. Now, we know, like in England, by this point, by the time of the French Revolution in the late 18th century, England had already had a couple of female rulers. Mary, Bloody Mary, Queen Elizabeth. So there are other monarchies that will crown a female. Usually the son would be put first, but if it came down to it, a female would be crowned. French law, however, states that females cannot be crowned at all. So the daughter, Marie Theresa, in that moment, she was not a threat, right? The little girl was not a threat. Now, growing up and having a child of her own, if it had been a son, that son could be in line for the throne. But Maria Theresa, the daughter herself, not a threat because she can't be crowned anyway. Now, also what happens is that once the king in France dies, however way he goes, you know, in England, a lot of times the monarchy will change their name. Like they'll go by a different name and they get crowned. But automatically, once that person dies, the son or the next in line, the next male in line, or the brother or whoever it is, automatically takes the role of monarch, of king, whatever his name is, and the number, right? So the guy who met the guillotine was Louis XVI. His son was Louis Charles. So they decide to try Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette for treason. Obviously, Louis XVI, he was done away with first. I'm trying to watch my words here. And then a few months later, she was done away with. Now, they say, too, that in their arrogance, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were in disbelief that they would ever execute a monarchy, which to me, I say that's dumb because they've done it before. They did it in the English Revolution. Was it Charles II? They cut his head off. So this has happened before in the scope of European principalities and kingdoms. So I don't know why they would think that they would just automatically be safe because of their royalty. But obviously they learned real fast they weren't. So once they were executed, Louis Charles automatically became King Louis XVII. All right. Automatically. Now this is an 8-year-old little boy who's sitting in a prison, right? Hasn't seen his parents in a while. He's in a jail cell. He's in a prison. Now, I will say that I'll give the French credit for this, though. At this time in history, we do see a lot of situations where children were executed. But I will say the French kind of sat with the kids for a while because they didn't know what to do with the children. They knew that releasing Louis Charles was a gamble because there were royalists that were still around that wanted to put him on the throne. Now, he's 8 years old at this time, so putting him on the throne in the middle of a revolution is pretty much impossible because he's 8. So he would have to have a regent anyway. Louis XVI's siblings had already fled France. They had fled. And so what they first did was they took Maria Theresa, the daughter, and they exiled her. They exiled her to her mother's family, to the Hapsburgs. But again, Maria Theresa is not a problem. She's a little girl. She can't rule anyway. So they're just going to send her to grandma's house in Vienna, right? Like she's just going to go stay with her family. So Louis Charles, they sit with him for a while. Now, the official story that we're told about Louis Charles is that they eventually agreed to adopt him out to a family that was very pro-revolution. And the official story goes that Louis Charles was adopted by this family and he was basically deprogrammed to not believe in monarchy. However, the story continues that Louis Charles was kind of sickly anyway, and so he died young as a child. He died young. There is a grave site for him, which we're going to get to because this legend has gotten so big that people actually exhumed his body, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But the legend goes, what actually happened was that there was a group of very powerful men, a small group of very powerful men in France that were royalists. They wanted to preserve the French monarchy. Now, most of the time, royalists have a lot of money. Money talks, money can bribe. And so what they did was they found a cousin of Louis Charles, a little boy around the same age as Louis Charles, who was a Hapsburg, who was sickly anyway. He was going to die anyway, which I think this is totally brutal what they did, but nonetheless, this is how the story goes. And so what these men did, these royalist men did, according to the legend, is that they talked to the prison guards and the laundress of the prison, and they worked out a deal. They were going to smuggle Louis Charles out of the prison. So what they did is they took Louis Charles's cousin, another little boy, a distant cousin that looked a lot like him, who was very sick anyway, didn't have much longer to live, and they put the little boy, they drugged him, and they put him in a rocking horse. And they brought the rocking horse into the prison as a toy for Louis Charles. Once the rocking horse was in the prison, they got the little boy out of the rocking horse. They traded clothes with Louis Charles, so the little boy would have Louis Charles's clothes on, and they put peasantry clothes on Louis Charles. They put Louis Charles in the bottom of the laundry basket, put dirty clothes and laundry on top of it, and literally walked out with Louis Charles in the basket, which I shit you not, guys, that is also the story of Annie, the little orphan Annie. She gets in a laundry basket too. So riddle me that, Batman. Maybe that was just a common escape route in those days. I don't know. But that is how he got out of prison. Okay, so then the cousin, who is very sick anyway, he's the one that goes on and gets adopted out and ends up passing away. So before we get to what happened to Louis Charles, let's talk a little bit about this supposed alleged cousin. So Louis Charles, the body, the little boy, is obviously buried in France as Louis XVII. Now, a while ago, when they started DNA testing, they exhumed the body of this little boy just to check his DNA, to see, like, once and for all, let's put an end to this legend. Let's see, like, who was this little boy? And the DNA they were able to get, basically all it said, all they could really look at was the mitochondrial DNA. So the mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that you get from your mother. And this little boy's mitochondrial DNA did match the Hapsburgs. So this does not prove really anything. We're still stuck at square one because Louis Charles and his cousin would have the same mitochondrial DNA because both of their mothers were Hapsburgs.
Yeah, so it still doesn't clarify.
Still doesn't clarify if this boy was literally a Louis Charles, if he was Louis Charles or a cousin. Now, what would actually probably give us clarity is if one of the P family members would submit their DNA. But I don't think they're going to do that. I just don't think they're going to do that. All right. So that's with the cousin. We still don't know. Question mark. All we know is that the body, the little boy that's buried in France, is a Hapsburg. That's all we know, is that he does have Hapsburg DNA. That's it. So Louis Charles, though, so back to the legend, after this little boy is taken out of prison, he spends a few years basically in hiding in France with these royalists who are taking care of him. And their goal is, when he is old enough, to put him back on the throne. Right? So they're training him. They're giving him an education. He ends up going to Egypt. Like, this kid, if this is a true story, this kid had a hell of a life. Let me tell y'all. He went off to Egypt with one guy and like watched all these wars happen. And then this one dude died, and he left Louis Charles what would be the equivalent of $1 million today, which is it's a pretty big sum of money, but not, if it's for today's standards, it's not enough to like really, it's nothing that he was used to. And somebody asked me this on my channel, would he have been able to get a lot of money if he was a prince? No, the revolutionaries had taken control of everything. So he had nothing. He walked out of that prison in a laundry basket. Like, there was nothing. So the money he inherited from this one guy that was taking care of him was a decent sized money to kind of help him as he was preparing to take the throne back. Now, we have a little problem, though. There was a little problem in their plan, because they never planned on him leaving France. Again, they were going to kind of keep him hidden, educate him, train him in military, so that when he was old enough to go to battle, he could take his throne back. But we have this little situation called Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon is in France and frankly all over Europe, just Napoleon everywhere. He's just doing his thing. He's just being a Napoleon, you know, conquering, doing all these things, wants to be the emperor, becomes the emperor of France. And we have a hiccup, because according to the legend, Napoleon realized at one point that this little boy was still alive. He's still alive. So according to the legend, the royalists who were protecting Louis Charles had to figure out a way to continue to protect him. So they knew that a lot of the employees, we'll say, of the French House of Bourbon had gone to the English court up in England, in London, for asylum, basically. Now, the King of England at this time was, as we say in the United States, Mad King George III. He just lost the American colonies. He went kind of cuckoo. He's a little wackadoo. If you ever get to see the play Hamilton in America, the best character, the funniest character, is King George III. He's the comic relief because he's so wackadoo. And his wife was a woman named Queen Charlotte. Now, Queen Charlotte was a Hapsburg. So Louis Charles is her cousin. So the royalists reach out to the English royal court, and they agree to take in Louis Charles. They send Louis Charles to London. Now, they can't keep him here for too long, though, because remember, the whispers of revolution are everywhere. King George just lost the American colonies. The French are over across the creek whacking people's heads off. In fairness to Charlotte and George, as a human being, they were terrified. If word got out that they were harboring this prince, this Dauphin, the lost Dauphin of France, things could go south very quickly. So this is what they did. Now, I'll say the name one more time. The name Pesur is a French name. It means weight master. What is a weight master? So this guy named George P., he was the weight master for Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. He weighed the gold and the silver. He was basically their accountant. He paid their bills for them. Okay, that's what that name means. And this George dude, according to the legend, had sought asylum at the French court. I mean, at the English court when the French started going wackadoo. So the story goes that King George and Queen Charlotte decided to devise a plan. They were going to send George P. and this little boy. They were going to give him a new name. His name was now going to be Daniel. That's his name now. Daniel Pesur. He was going to be the son of George P. And they were going to send George and his son to America. And they were going to stay there in America until the time was right for him to come back to France and take the throne. Now, we have a little problem here. We have a little little thing we got to work out, because again, King George doesn't own the colonies anymore. He lost the colony. So how can he just send these people to America and give them like land? Well, this part of the story cracked me up, because I'm gonna ask you guys in the chat. I'm gonna ask you, Shanti. I think I know the answer with you. I see it in your eyes. How many of y'all faked your parents' signature growing up? How many of y'all did that? How many of y'all like faked your parents' signature? Because that's what King George did, y'all. That's what he did. He faked his dad's signature. Let me explain. So after the Americans won the American Revolution, there were lots of people in the colonies who had land grants given to them by the royal court of England. And the American government said, you know what? We're not gonna kick you off your land. We're gonna let you keep your land. It's fine. So what King George did, y'all, and this is what cracks it, we do have this. This is evidence of this deed. He wrote out this deed, pretending like he was his father, the guy who ruled before, signed the deed, giving this land to George Pesur. Now, here's the funny thing. He gave him land in the state of North Carolina, very close to where I live, actually. Now, he wrote the county name down on this deed. That county did not exist before the American Revolution. So obviously this is a forgery that King George did. Oh, well, he sends them to America. They've got this piece of paper in this tiny town of this land. All right. Now, we also have some allegedly, possibly, I think there is reasonable doubt here, forged birth certificates. Because if you look at the birth certificates we'll say birth records, because it's not really the same as the certificates we have now. It says that George was actually born in Maryland, not in France. And it shows that Daniel was born in Maryland, not in France, and then moved to North Carolina. So people think that might have been a forgery to get people off the scent that this kid was actually Louis Charles. So now let's talk a little bit about this little town in North Carolina where they lived, and George and his wife ended up having more kids too. So you had Daniel and you had all these brothers and sisters, this P family. Now, as in the town of North Carolina, as this family, grew in size, and it's a tiny town, but people did start to notice that Daniel had a very different level of education than the siblings. He wrote better than the siblings. He also had a different look about him than the siblings. Now, could it have been that he was the oldest son? And back in those days, they just put more emphasis on the oldest son's education. That could be a possibility too. But nonetheless, that's kind of, the town started like whispering about this family. Now, in the United States, now a lot of people looking online at this conspiracy, a lot of people are like, well, didn't they tell they were French? Like they were speaking French, they weren't English. And I have something to say about that because I'm from the South too. There were a lot of French settlers in the deep South where I live as well. It wasn't just New Orleans. Okay, this comes down to religion. So when the colonies were governed by Great Britain, by the United Kingdom, they were predominantly Protestant. They were, England is Church of England. New Orleans, as it was founded by the French, was Catholic. So a lot of the French Huguenots, Protestants, like my ancestors, a lot of my French ancestors were Huguenots, came to South Carolina, North Carolina, the banks of Georgia to settle. And so for many generations, French has heavily been spoken in the South, not just in New Orleans. My mother spoke French growing up too. Okay. Like Brice, my first name is my mother's maiden name. It's actually Brice. That's French. Louisiana was Catholic. So Louisiana is very French, but so is the other part of this. That's what I'm saying. A lot of people think this legend is bunk because they came to North Carolina and they were French. What I'm saying is someone from this area back in those times in the late 18th century, early 19th century, it would not have been weird to have a French family move there. French was heavily spoken all over the South. There's even a French quarter in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay. So, my dad's mother, her last name was, they say it's Bennett, but it's Benet. It's French. So a lot. I mean, that's my main ancestry is English and French. And it's because they were Protestants and they didn't want to get their heads chopped off by the Catholics. So they merged themselves into an English society because of religious freedom to be Protestant. Does that make sense? So a lot of people in these little tiny towns all over the Southeast are speaking French. So having a French family move in and like parlaying the Francais, not weird. That's not weird. Most of the people in town probably, at least if they didn't speak French themselves, at least understood French and English, right? That was very normal back then. Very, very normal. So that's not weird at all. At all. But what gets very suspicious is we have some other people, some other characters in this story that start coming to this town around this time. One of them is a guy named Peter Stewart Ney. Now, Peter Stewart Ney was also French. Heavy French accent. And actually, from France, a documentary group actually just came to North Carolina to exhume his body to check this conspiracy because people thought he was actually a man named Michel Ney. Michel Ney was one of Napoleon's big whoop-de-doo generals. All right. And there was some issues, and Michel Ney was allegedly executed. They eventually brought back what would be Louis XVIII, which would be Louis XVII's uncle. Meanwhile, Daniel is still in North Carolina. There's all this stuff going on. Listen, after the French Revolution between Napoleon and the Bourbon family, it is confusing to follow because they kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It is a shit show of the Illuminati fighting it out, right? So Daniel's just over here in North Carolina, like living in the Appalachian Mountains, you know? But this guy shows up by the name of Peter Stewart Ney. He's a teacher, very French, very patriotic to France. He's an incredible swordsman. And so people start suspecting that this guy is actually Michel Ney. And perhaps he faked his death because when Michel Ney was executed, they didn't chop his head off like they did with everybody else. They had a firing squad. And not many people witnessed it. So people started to speculate that this Peter Stewart Ney was this Michel Ney, and that he had something to do with this weird Pesur family. Where this one boy looks nothing like his siblings and it speaks better than his siblings and is far better educated than his siblings. You know, I think what they were looking for about around that time, or the word they were looking for, was handler. Was he a handler? But he's not the only one. He's not the only one. This is where it gets so fun, you guys. And this is a topic I actually really love and probably should cover more. There's another part to the Southeast that people might not know, unless you're from here. Most of us descend from pirates. That's right, my friends. We have a lot of pirate folklore down here in the Southeast. Still lots of legends of hidden treasures down here. Blackbeard sailed all up and down these parts. My boyfriend is a descendant of Peter Knight, who was a pirate. Tons of information on that dude. I mean, like, that is my favorite of all his ancestors. We've been reading all this stuff about him. I'm like, this dude was like, he was a badass. Anyway, so we have a lot of pirate folklore down here. So pirates at this time, pirates were normal. They were just everywhere. I mean, we're talking about post-American Revolution. Like, the American Revolution, besides the French that came to help us, we were a bunch of just ragtag 17-year-olds with pew-pew thingies. Like, this was the Wild West. Like, people, people were trying to figure it out. We were fledgling, and we're in this wilderness here. It's crazy Appalachian Mountains. I mean, listen to Jessica's story. This is where this all takes place, where all the Bigfoots are. This is where all this is happening. And so people knew pirate energy. They knew a pirate when they saw a pirate. And they kind of liked the pirates. Like, they were kind of partial to the pirates. Well, New Orleans had a very famous pirate named Jean Lafitte. Very, very famous pirate. Now, Jean Lafitte, he wasn't that great of a dude. Like, he was heavily involved in the slave trade. But that's kind of beside the point, right? He did help Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. Like, he really gave a lot to help the cause, But because he helped so much with, like, the Battle of New Orleans, He was kind of exonerated as some of his like pirating charges, but he was told he had to get out of Louisiana. Now, at this point, though, we have this is what's weird to me. I actually do believe that this dude we're going to talk about, Lorenzo Ferrer, was actually Jean Lafitte. And there are a lot of people who have done deep research just into this dude alone. And the evidence is overwhelming that this guy was actually Jean Lafitte. So Jean Lafitte, his actual death records, he has a different story about everything. Like some say he died in Texas. Some people say he died in Honduras. Like he's got all these random stories. It's weird. It's weird. Now, there's also something about this guy, Lorenzo Ferrer, that moved into this area that made people think he was Jean Lafitte. In Louisiana at this time, so before Louisiana Purchase was made, before Louisiana was annexed onto the United States, and again, at this point, guys, Louisiana was not just this little boot state. It was like a huge territory, right? They had different laws regarding interracial marriage, we'll say. So we know from many countries all over the world for a long time, there were laws about marrying different races, right? For a long time there. I mean, even in modern times, there were still laws against it. It's just recently that it's become acceptable and not against the law. Well, in New Orleans, they have all these different names for people who are mixed. Both black and white. And in New Orleans, it was more acceptable for a white man to be with a mixed woman. So Jean Lafitte allegedly had this lady friend, pseudo girlfriend, who was a mulatto. Now in Louisiana, not that big of a deal. Comes to North Carolina, that becomes a big deal, right? So this man comes in with this mulatto chick, Lorenzo Ferrer. We also know that Lorenzo Ferrer also immediately joined the Freemasonry Lodge. Now, there is a mother and daughter team that did deep research into this. They're from this area of North Carolina, and I've been trying to get in touch with them because I want to hear this story. I listened to an interview where they were actually allowed into the Freemason Lodge in this town. That's basically unheard of. And they found this sword that apparently belonged to Lorenzo Ferrer. And on the sword, there was the name Jean Lafitte. So that's actual evidence that this is who this was, this pirate. Now, here's the interesting thing too, guys. Jean Lafitte, or Lorenzo Ferrer, and his Peter Stewart Ney apparently had some words on the town square in French. They were kind of fighting it out in French. Now, I want to know what they were fighting about because no one seems to have record of what they were actually fighting about. But I'm telling you, my friends, I'm telling you, at this time in history, my guess is majority of people that were walking around on the street with them knew French. Again, my mother speaks it. You know, like this was common. So you can't tell me that somebody I would be spying. Like, let's be real, my friends. If I saw two grown-ass men who already had some weird rumors around them, one is probably this like supposedly executed marshal for Napoleon, and the other one's giving off heavy pirate vibes, and they're bickering in the town square as old men, you best believe my ass is going to be spying. Have you guys seen those videos of like people posting it, like the cops are at somebody's apartment building and their neighbor's like is outside with a vacuum cleaner, like vacuuming the lawn just to look busy to figure out? That's what I would be doing. I would be outside vacuuming the street just to listen in what these two old men who already have some weird energy are fighting about. But no one seems to have that recorded. No one seems to know, which I find very suspicious. So we've got basically two handlers is what people think. Two handlers are here. In this tiny, and this is not New York City. This is not New York City. This is not Charleston, South Carolina. This is a tiny ass town. We're talking this town still today has like one main street and that's it. Like, I don't even know if this town has a Walmart. I don't even know if this town has a Target. Like, this is a tiny, tiny town where all this happened. So you mean to tell me that all these weird, strange French people, one with pirate energy, just show up one day? Come on. Something's weird about this. Now, the next thing that happens, my friends, is the Marquis de Lafayette. So in almost every state, I guarantee it, almost every state, there's a Lafayette named after the Marquis de Lafayette. Now, Marquis de Lafayette. I know, Charmaine, I'm just kidding, but you know, like small towns always have a Walmart, but if it's a really small town, there is no Walmart. That's how small it is. Now, the Marquis de Lafayette, you guys, he was a big American Revolution war hero. He literally was a rich kid from France whose parents died young, and he just decided at a very young age he was going to go have fun and play in the American Revolution. And that's what he did. And he did help us win, but his story is kind of comical. Like, think about like who's like a super like rich bratty kid that just has more money than he knows what to do with, and his parents died young, and so he just like decides, I'm gonna go play war. I'm gonna go play GI Joe. I'm gonna just go to America. But he used a lot of money, of his own money, to help the troops. So anyway, he was also really big in the Freemasons in Paris, France, with Benjamin Franklin.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, so is John Lafitte as well, right? John Lafitte is also doing some shenanigans in the Masonic. The Masons are all over the story. They're all over the story. Okay. So all of a sudden, after a few years after the Revolution, the Marquis de Lafayette was granted, like, to thank him for his services in the American Revolution, he was like granted citizenship, which I don't really understand how that worked back then, because from what I understand, like, people could just bop around if they wanted to. So whatever, maybe it was just an honorary thing. So Lafayette comes back to the United States and goes on this massive tour. Now, in one of the books, the Book of Daniel, they talk about this tour. Y'all, this story actually, this is what cracks me up about history, is like, these people are no different than us, y'all. They're no different than us. They're people like us. This one time when I lived in Los Angeles, I went to see John Bon Jovi in concert with my then boyfriend and another friend. We were the youngest people there. All of the women there were middle-aged at that time, and they wore their big 80s hair, right? They all had their hair sprayed. This was in like the 2000s, y'all. And where our seats were, we watched John Bon Jovi. The concert started. John Bon Jovi popped up and he's playing his guitar, and then he gets off the podium to walk through the audience to the stage. Watching those women throw themselves on John Bon Jovi was a sight for sore eyes. I will never forget that image of these grown-ass middle-aged women throwing themselves on John Bon Jovi. Okay? All these women were probably married. They probably had teenage kids at home. Same thing happened with the Marquis de Lafayette, y'all. So the Marquis de Lafayette, they talk about this in like old newspaper articles, where the Marquis de Lafayette is like on his horse, gallivanting through these towns on this tour, and these women in their big dresses are like throwing themselves on him. I laughed so hard when I read that. Like, these grown-ass American women were like slutting themselves out for this Marquis de Lafayette. Like, nothing has changed. He was a rock star. Like, nothing has changed. We are the same people as we were back then. And all these women had husbands at home and like 20 kids, but they, so this tour that the Marquis de Lafayette went on was really a big deal in America. It was like the Rolling Stones or John Bon Jovi going on tour, right? All these towns, we had his tour map schedule. We knew where he was going. He was hitting all the big cities. He was going to all these different Freemason lodges. But he also ends up going to the town, this tiny ass little town, where we've got this pirate. We've got this alleged executed marshal who faked his death. And we've got the Payseurs. He stops by this tiny town that didn't even have a damn Walmart to see this cast of characters. Why would he do that? If you're going on tour and you're the Marquis de Lafayette, the 18th century John Bon Jovi, why would you stop at a podunk town in the middle of Appalachia? You go to the big cities to greet your adoring fans, right? Why would you stop at this little ass town, again, with a full cast of characters? Again, think about this, guys. Tiny ass town. And we've got pirate, alleged executed marshal, and a freaking family that's got one son that seems to be very different from the rest of the family. And there's some these weird characters are kind of hovering around this one particular child. They don't hide very well, do they? And they're all stopping. And even though there's no Walmart in this town, there's a Mason Lodge. Sure as shit, there's a Mason Lodge.
There's a Mason Lodge everywhere. There was Masonic hotels in the town where I grew up.
But this is a tiny town. And this is in Appalachia, guys. Like Appalachia at this point was hard to transverse. Like there are even parts of Appalachia we still can't transverse. So the fact that there was all this like buzzing around this family by these cast of, I mean, I hope one day they make a movie. Whether this legend is true or not, I would watch that movie because this had to be. Listen, if I was living in this town, y'all know, if I had lived in this town during this day, I'd be sitting out on my front porch in my long dress, eating my 18th century popcorn, just watching it all happen because it's not. This is strange, right? This is a strange phenomenon, and this legend is again, it's so big, this legend, that even Lincolnton in this town today, which I'm only like 3 hours from. So I told my boyfriend, I was like, we totally need to go there and like do some snooping around. The cemeteries where these cast of characters are buried, they've exhumed some of the bodies to check DNA. Like Peter Stewart Ney, they checked his DNA. This legend is huge. All right. So what happened? All right. So obviously, Louis Charles never made it back to France, which was the original plan. What I think happened in my own, yeah, Susan, vacuuming your lawn. I would totally be back vacuuming my lawn. Listen, if there's a pirate outside arguing with another old geezer that is kind of strange and has a backstory over this weird little boy over here, I'm totally going to be vacuuming my front lawn to listen in on what they're saying. I will learn French so fast. Nothing will motivate me to learn another language than hot gossip. I will learn it so fast. Anyway, so obviously Daniel, or Louis Charles, if that's who he is, never made it over to France. He never took back the throne. So what I think happened, you guys, I think that because we look at astrologically what was happening at the end of the 18th century when all this started, and now astrologically are the same. So think about everything going on in our world. We're all learning things. Things are happening. People are getting pissed off. There's this like enlightenment happening. So I think that at that time, everything kind of backfired a little bit on them. And so they could not bring him back to France because of Napoleon and all the kerfuffle. And I think they felt like, okay, plan B. Plan B. We're going to allow the world to think that you died as Louis Charles. And we're going to continue with this Pesur family. Now, there's also all these legends that there is gold. There's a Pesur mountain in this town buried around the mountain. There's tons of legends because all of a sudden Daniel started to get a lot of money. Now, as I said, Daniel, not the other siblings, Daniel, the one son. Now, as I said, this is not money from the Bourbon family because that was confiscated during the Revolution. But if this is a bloodline family, and Chantelle, you would know more about this than me because you interact with whistleblowers more than I do. And this kid is a Hapsburg, a Bourbon, a Borgia. He's just like the Mac Daddy of Aluma Schmati bloodline. And they've got him in this new fledgling country, and they can't put him back on the throne of France. It's not going to work. Don't you suspect that the Aluma Schmati would send him more money to start building an empire there behind the scenes, pulling the strings behind the scenes?
Yeah, most definitely, because they know their own. We know how they work. He would have been their asset. Yep. It's not a child that they're trying to save from the claws of baddies or whatever, right? He's their asset. And he has the bloodlines. And no doubt they would have known that. Just everything that is happening around that, as you say, just receiving the money, looking different, just all sorts of weird things happening. The uncertainties, etc., I think would definitely, he was put there for a reason. He was there for a purpose. That's my opinion. And yeah, he's the asset. They were going to breed with him.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
Well, can I? And I'll say, okay, so I say Illuma Shmati because of the algorithms. So that's why I say some words weird because of the algorithms. Because they don't like us talking about this stuff, guys. They don't like us, maybe ran a channel that was like just a drama channel and then talked about a legend every now and again, we'd probably be okay. But the fact that Shanti and I talk about this shit all the time, they watch us. So I have to be very careful. We have to be very careful. And I don't want to, I'm on Shanti's channel. I'm careful on my own channel. I want to be careful on Shanti's channel too. Can I share screen, Shanti? I'm going to show some pictures of some of
Yeah.
you
just go to present.
Yeah, let me find it here. All right. So I'm just going to pull up some images here of some of the famous P families. Do you see it? It's in the backstage.
Yes.
Because we have Jonas P. All right, so I don't know if you can see this dude right here where my mouse is, the black and white picture right here.
Yeah.
That's Jonas P. So I don't think we actually have a proper family. Oh, look, there's Marie Antoinette and her 2 children. I don't think we actually have a picture of Daniel. I haven't found a reliable picture of Daniel, but Jonas was his son, Daniel's son. Jonas was also extremely, extremely wealthy. All right, that's all I want to show you. Just Jonas's, so we can take it down now. I just want you guys to see Jonas. Now, I'm still doing research following the family line to now, because there's a lot. There's a lot. Jonas was also extremely.
Brice. Sorry, just going back to what you were saying, it's kind of got my head ticking. And again, when you speak to Caleb, we did a show not too long ago. And of course, you look at his bloodlines, right? And my question to him was, they obviously must have known. And how did they know, He says, before you even born.
Yeah.
Before you even born, if you've got the bloodlines they want, you are as this child. And it sort of reminds me as well. And I'm trying to think of his name. When I first started working with Jesse, Jonas someone. And he wasn't born into an Illuminati family, but he had, I think, all of the 13 bloodlines present. And they took him. I mean, they kidnapped that child. He's been taken by the system. That mother has been fighting for years to get her son back, and she's impotent against them. That child is, So they will tell kids, they watch them, and and remember, just because this was however many years ago, they've always had this angelic type technology where they're looking and they can see and da-da-da. It's only us humans that have been dumbed down to that. They, for sure, have it. So they know exactly what they're looking for.
I mean, Louis Charles was a Hapsburg, a Bourbon, a freaking Borgia. Look at all the family. And I agree with you, Shanti. Honestly, Shanti, like, I know we've talked a lot about this off screen, but even us not, even if we didn't have YouTube channels, I think you and I get attacked a lot because we have, which is another show I'm working on. I told Shanti about the O negative bloodline. We both carry it. And the fact that we're not, I think they come for us a lot because we're not, that we're the bloodline they want. And we're not doing what they want us to do. Right. So absolutely.
But it's like, looking at your siblings, you get you get the ones that are good and the ones that are naughty. And it's like, hey guys, come now, stop your shit.
My sister's B negative. I'm O negative. So she hasn't had near the crap I've had, and they do. I think they know, because I think they're able to look. And of course I know, and too, Shanti, we know we have family descendants that were in this group. We know that. A lot of us have this surprise plot twist, you guys. Plot twist. I bet all y'all, as we say down here in the South, all y'all, if you go back in your family line, you got somebody that was playing around with these kids. So it's definitely Susan, a lot of people are actually not just the US presidents. I think a lot of us, especially who are awake now, if you look in your ancestry line, you're going to find some interesting people that you did not know were there, So I would not be surprised. And again, I'm going to say this too. I want to clear. I know I say this all the time, you guys, and I think we know on this, especially on your channel, Shanti, we cannot judge somebody solely on their last name or solely on their bloodline, because there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, their soul picked to be born into that hell, like Jesse, like Caleb, and they, for reasons that they could come out and tell us, right? People are only judged on their actions. That is it. And that's kind of the point with the whole P family. Regardless of whether, it doesn't matter. Like if the P family is as bad as legend states they are, is as evil as legend states they are, it doesn't matter if they're a descendant of Louis Charles or not, right? And the opposite could be true. They could be a descendant of Louis Charles and they could be really good people. It doesn't matter. What matters is their action. It's just the story is very interesting. And if the story is true, and that does explain why they're nefarious, then it gives us a little bit more insight into how wickedly detailed this group is and how much they really value particular bloodlines, right? And that, again, if you look at the law of one, that's a huge difference between the dark and the light. The dark has elitism. The dark says, yes, certain bloodlines are better. Certain people are better. The light says, no, everybody is equal. Everybody is equal in social memory complex. And whatever bloodline you're in is your own experience for this existence. It doesn't, so that's a huge difference between the dark and the light, right? Does that make sense? I know I'm tired, so I might not be making sense. But so at the end of the day, the story doesn't actually, what we need to be worried about is what are they doing today? What is this family? And I know for a fact, because I've looked through a lot of Pesur family members' records, like the Book of Daniel was written by Stephen Pesur. I don't think all of them are involved in this, but we know that from people like Jesse and Caleb, that not every single family member is even aware that this is happening, right? Because Stephen.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have certain kids that are not involved at all, and they create the cover, but then they'll have other kids that are, and they're very deceptive in terms of how they do it. They literally will hypnotize the parents or of the child, and often it's the grandparents taking them in. They literally hypnotize, they enchant them, or I think that's the magic they use, that they sleep and they don't know what's going on.
I mean, get this, guys. Get how this works. Get this. This gets me sometimes. So my great grandfather on my mother's side, his name was my mom's dad's dad. He was Joseph Brice, Dr. Joseph Brice, or my mom's maiden name. He was a 33rd degree Master Mason. He was a surgeon, and I share his birthday. I had the same birthday as him. He died long before I was alive. We have the same birthday, and I have his name. And I'm O negative. So you see how that pattern works? And here I am on the internet trying to expose this shit. And he was doing it. My great grandfather, he was doing it on both sides of the family. But that one in particular, I share his birthday and I have his name. Weird, isn't it? And I'm O negative.
Yeah.
So it's just the little
crazy shenanigans
for sure. So they kind of messed up with us, Shanti. Like we got, the Cassiopeians. I'm using one of their terms. They talk about window droppers. When they talk about window droppers, what they're talking about is like fourth density beings that accidentally get spotted. They don't mean to be spotted, but they get spotted. They kind of like window drop. And they're like, oops, like they're more shocked you see them than you actually seeing them. And I kind of laughed and I told, because my boyfriend's also RH negative and he comes from some weird family stuff too. And I said, I think we're actually window droppers from the Illuminati. I think you, me, Shanti, I think we actually, oops, like we fell out. Like we kind of like fell out. We're like the apple that fell off the tree and rolled away, And I think a lot of us are that. I think that's not just us on YouTube. I think a lot of people, a lot of y'all watching are probably what I would call a window dropper from the Illuminati. I think that's how it works. I think that's how karma balances itself, And so, but anyway, I'm still, again, this is still an ongoing research for me. Somebody said they thought maybe the P family owned Bank of America. That could be the case. I'll look more into that.
Because they're part of the Rothschilds, aren't they? Didn't they? I mean, aren't they part of that Rothschild lineage?
I don't think they're Rothschilds. I know they are Bourbon, Borgia, and Hapsburg. I think the Rothschilds are more English royal family that they're intermixed with. But I will look. I know they owned a lot of the railroads, and the railroads are being built. I know there's a lot of corporations are tied to them. There's a lot of people who have actually done deep dives into all the corporations on like Rumble. Because obviously, again, this is a tricky family to talk about. Now, but Lydia, remember the name that they're under is not their actual name. So you got to remember that. Payseur isn't their name. Daniel, if the legend is correct, they're Bourbons. Louis Charles was a Bourbon, but he took the name for protection to hide. So they're not actually George, the adopted father, was an accountant. That's what that name means. That's all he was an accountant. He wasn't anyone special. George was not any Illumashmati, right? Like, he just worked for the Illumashmati. He paid the Illumashmati's bills. He weighed their gold and silver. But he was loyal to them, right? So they used him. And I have a feeling some of these like employees of the Illumashmati probably saw some stuff that they couldn't.
Yeah, they probably would have, especially in the early days, ended up somehow getting involved.
Yeah.
You know?
They did. I bet you anything when King George and Queen Charlotte called old George to the meeting to say this is what you're going to do, he probably just said oui and did it, because I don't think you oui. I don't think I don't think you question that.
No.
And
I would go no.
I mean, how stressed out would that be? Can you just have a little bit of empathy for old George and his wife? Like, could you imagine, like, the Illumashmati hands you a little boy who's like the lost Dauphin, their prized possession of bloodlines, and they're like, keep him alive and hide him in your family. I would be so effing stressed out. I'd be like, oh my God, I would be so anxiety filled because you've got this kid and they want to use him, and they'll freaking like murder you if you don't do what you need to do for the. I mean, that's a very hard position to be in for old George. And so I definitely, that does not go unnoticed by me. But George, he's just the custodian. He's not the P family is not the blood. It's not the P family that's the bloodline. That's just the name they're using. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. It does make sense. Thank you. I mean, it's very interesting. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I'll stay updated on that for you guys.
Yeah, we will definitely be looking forward to updates. Okie dokie. Then I want to say thank you so much. Unless there's something else you want to add more about little George or Daniel or whoever the heck it is.
Eventually, I will make my way to this little town in North Carolina. I'm more excited about the pirate. Like, if I'm gonna be real honest with you guys, I want to know more about Jean Lafitte. Like, that's these pirate stories like get me. Like, I'm like, I think it would have been a while. And being a Southerner, like, we hear them all the time. We know that pirates are everywhere. We know a lot of us are descendants from pirates. But how wild would that have been to live in a time where you actually just sat out and watched pirates just pirating? Like Jack Sparrow's just running around.
I probably was one of them.
Maybe one day if boyfriend will let me, I will do a deep dive on his direct ancestor who was a pirate, Peter Knight.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
So, yeah. Yes.
Okie dokie. Thank you, beautiful Brice, and thank you to all our ladies and lovely gentlemen for supporting us and joining us and keeping us company in our chat tonight. Really good to have you all here. Just checking.
Lisa D. Arg. Listen, some of the paintings of Jean Lafitte, he was kind of hot too. Maybe it's because he was a pirate. I don't know. I kind of have a thing for bad boys.
Look. Johnny Depp was a very hot pirate. I'm not a Johnny Depp fan, but let's face it. I think a pirate, as long as he at least washes himself, I mean, he's got to be a little bit clean, okay? You got to put him in the bath. You got to take him and just put him in the bath.
The shirt open with the hair flowing. Like, I just listen. Maybe it's just a bad boy thing. Maybe
now I want to put him in the bath first. You must first get into the bath.
I asked my boyfriend. I'm like, "Do you have a painting? Have you found a painting of Peter Knight? Because I need to see this ancestor." And he's like, "No, I can't find it. In my head, I've got this strong man, and he was probably like a Weasley little British kid that got annoyed and started pirating. I don't know. but they were the original bad boys, the pirates. So I have a little bit of, even though Jean Lafitte was not a good guy, I kind of have a little bit of a crush on him. I kind of have a little bit of a crush on Cesare Borgia too, let's be honest. But these were not good.
You got a little history crush, have you? You got a little history crush. You got to be a cold crush.
In my early 30s. This is why I was dating all these really bad men and had to go to therapy in my early 30s, because I like bad. Why? I don't know why I like bad boys, but I do.
Look at you, clearly like dead boys as well. There's something seriously wrong, guys.
I mean, if a freaking pirate walks through, my boyfriend's gonna be in trouble if a freaking pirate walks through. I'm gonna be like, oh my god, it's a pirate. I mean, I would have been one of those ladies in my old hoop skirt in the South, like fanning myself because Jean Lafitte walked by, a damn pirate. Like, I would be chasing the pirate energy, and like, not daddy issues. I got pirate issues. Like, I don't know where this comes from. Like, where does this come from?
Exactly. Well, I think we should do a show on the pirates. We're still waiting for Spartacus, though. Spartacus is my kind of. Oh no, I like them gladiators. Oh no, bring me those gladiators.
Spartacus is your history crush that we found.
Spartacus is my dead crush.
Okay, can I ask that to the audience just for funsies and just to throw the algorithms off in the comment section? Who's your dead person crush? Like, who's your history? Come on. I know who's
your history crush?
Who's your history crush? I know we got some men that were totally crushing over Martha Washington. She was pleasantly plump, wasn't she, guys? What was your history crush? Tell me, guys. I want to know who your history crush was. And I can't be the only woman who has a crush on Jean Lafitte and Cesare Borgia. Come on, I can't be the only one.
Well, I better be the only one that has a crush on Spartacus.
Yes. He's all yours, Shanti. You got him.
I'm going to fight for this dead man.
Oh, Colleen, you've never stared at those portraits? Like, you've never stared at a portrait of some dead dude and you're like, damn. They really made him pretty back then. Damn,
he's a bit all right. Come back to life.
Yes. I mean,
you had some conjuration spells.
There's something to be said about not having TV. Those men had to like work out all day just to pirate their ships and toy their fields. Ooh, those chests, those arms. Yes, please. Give me some version any day. Very, very attractive men. So
I'll stick with Spartacus, thanks. He's my kind of guy.
Gladiators, man, they were fighting for their lives. So
I'm gonna be doing a show on Spartacus.
We will. We should do this series, Shanti. Hot men of history. That's what we should do.
Oh no, we're definitely doing it. I just saw hot men of history. Yeah, Spartacus is going first.
God, we're so weird. I love it. We're so weird.
You come and bring your wiener and a pickle jar now as well.
Rasputin is not on that list, guys. Let's be honest. Rasputin, like that guy. Remember the guy from the revolution that like did like, remember that guy? He was hot. Like the priest guy, he was a total commie, but he was hot. Like, and I even told you guys, like that is where they get me. Throw a good looking man out there, I will follow him. Like that is where I have to be aware of that. I have to totally be aware of that because that is where they will get me. So yeah, so you guys tell us your history hotties and maybe we'll do a show over them.
Yeah, history hotties. Hottie histories. Okay, everybody. We will definitely be doing a follow-up on our history hotties. So thank you, Brice. And thank you, everybody. Have beautiful fun on this beautiful Wednesday. Tomorrow is Pusa Thursday. You guys don't know what Pusa Thursday is. Pusa is an African word for drink. Party Thursday.
Carol Custer just wrote, we need to put that on a t-shirt. Carol, we got it. Don't forget to drink the pickle juice.
Yeah, exactly. No, I ain't drinking none of that. Ooh, no, gosh. You make me throw up here.
I mean, it's yours anyway. I mean, who likes that anyway? Girls just do that because they love their man, but that, yeah. Anyway, that's a topic for a different show.
Different day for a age restricted show. We'll do that on Patreon one day. Okay, guys, everybody. Yes, hopefully we will see Caleb tomorrow. I'm not sure. Depends how he's doing. keep your eyeballs on the notice board, and I will, if he's going to be doing a show with us, that'll be tomorrow evening. Otherwise, I'll see you Friday. I think Joanne Breeze, yes, Joanne, you're in the chat. I'll see Joanne on Friday. Jerry Marzinski on Saturday. So yeah, cool things happening on the horizon. Okay, everybody, that's fair. Did you know South Africans have got the sexiest, second sexiest accent in the world? Did you know that? We've been voted to have the second sexiest accent. The Kiwis beat us. Can you believe? Those Kiwis beat us. They're always beating us at something. And then the Irish were third. I like the Irish. They should have come first. Okay, everybody. Now that you have that bit of useless information, I wish you all a beautiful day.
Bye, guys.